YouTube to see if I can see it when it goes live so I can share it in the comment on your status.
We are live, and we're going to talk about art and what's been happening and how that affects art today. So we are here on my art channel, and these are some of my paintings. And I'm going to also read you a little bit from this book. It's called The Living Read, and it's by Pearl S. Buck. And those are all things that we're going to talk about.
Okay.
And also, I'm going to try to share as well. I think I forgot to mute things over here, so I'm going to...
No, I think it was me because I was trying to bring it up, so don't worry about that. I closed it.
Okay, because I'm trying to mute things so that I can share as well.
Okay.
So I should go now.
Okay. I wasn't sure if on your end. I thought that was on my end, so anyhow.
Yeah. So right now I'm going to be sharing this on Twitter. And let's see.
I'm just going to say one thing that I find very interesting, because we all know, like anybody who's kind of in the know knows that China owns a large part of the world economy at this point. We are in debt to China. These are just simple facts, and I think many people are aware of them, but maybe most people just don't pay attention to these things. However, what I find really concerning is when you start digging deeper into who are the main shareholders of Twitter, okay? And then you dig deeper into these companies like Morgan Stanley and others, and you look like, like what markets do they control right now? Isn't it interesting that they are going into mainland China and taking up large, portions? And once you go into China, what is very problematic about that is you're playing by the rules of the Chinese government. Just like this trade deal that the EU made with China the other day, you're playing by their rules, not by rules of fairness and integrity. Playing by their rules. What is very problematic about...
Okay, yeah, I'm going to try to share this also on my other channel, so I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. I just wonder, are people aware of that? So, for instance, I know a lot of people are praising modern China. They're like, well, China of the past, that's not the Great Leap Forward. We have novels that basically where some Chinese officials have apologized for things that happened during the Great Leap Forward, saying that was then, but this is now. We're like a new shiny China where you have an upwardly mobile middle class. However, there's still many human rights violations in China. So I know people wanted to dismiss like what's happening there, but they no longer talk about human rights. Nobody talks about the Uyghurs, and I find that very interesting. So we have an American president, and I don't even like him. I think he's very problematic, but I really hate him, okay, honestly. But I think people think you love him if you don't want his account deleted. I just don't want his account deleted because I don't think anybody should not have a platform online. Because when we start saying who can tweet, who can post, and if it's an independent company that doesn't have any affiliation with Twitter and Amazon, but now, who are the conglomerates that own the market? And now they have to scramble to find hosting, and their website has basically been taken offline. I begin to question that. So you might not like certain players, but you should question a world, well, when you start taking away the platform for one person, where does that end? And what did they do in China? Somebody said something against the leader in China, and they censored that person, or they disappeared.
They disappeared.
They disappeared. Yeah. But nobody, I don't know, I guess people are just turning a blind eye to this, or they just don't care.
No, I'm actually worried about Mr. Trump. I'm not going to say even President Trump, though he still is the president for a little while. But I'm going to say that I'm concerned about Mr. Trump and his family maybe disappearing after he no longer has protection. I don't know what's going to happen. I would feel safer if I saw him tweeting something stupid every day. I would know he was okay.
Well, at the end of the day, people did unsavory things. he says a lot of really stupid things on the internet. However, at the end of the day, those individuals decided upon their own accord. I looked at his tweets, they're unsavory. I don't really think they did exactly what people claim. Those groups are they're white supremacist groups. They did what they wanted to do with their own accord, and I don't agree with what they did. I think what they did was horrible. However, does that mean we should delete someone's account because they said something that we don't like? But he's always said things people didn't like, but now all of a sudden there was a push right before the election to have his account just deleted. So why now? That's another thing too. I'm like, why at this particular moment in time?
Yeah, and I would like to, have this discussion, not in terms of politics at all.
Yeah,
It's my art channel. I
yeah.
do here, this is the latest painting, just in case anybody wonders what I have been painting lately. I haven't posted how I painted this one. If you are a fan of my art, please continue watching the channel, even if you don't like this discussion right now, because it will continue to show how I paint. So, but as an artist, as a writer, and as an influencer on YouTube, such as we are, you and I both, Julia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm concerned about what's happening, but also from a free enterprise point of view, I really want to point out that it's very funny right now to hear all sorts of people who were never on the side of free enterprise quoting kind of free enterprisey things,
Yeah.
to say, well, that's a private company. They have the right to do whatever they want. If you want to have your own platform, why don't you found your own company
Um,
and
but guess what? Parlor did, right? Parlor has their
yeah,
own platform,
they
but here's
did.
the problem. Oh, conglomeration. Amazon hosts their platform, so now at noon today they're offline.
Yeah, yeah. So I would like to invite people who are watching this, who have heard about this on Twitter, assuming we haven't been silenced there yet. I've heard about this on Facebook. I've heard about this on my other channel. And what I would like to invite you to do is, if you have an opinion, please share that in the comments, and we will not ignore you. We will pay attention to your opinion. But
Mm-hmm.
just to go along with the fact that this is the long view. This is not the short view. This is not some Trump supporter who is really concerned about only one thing. It's not somebody who hero worships that particular guy.
No,
Um,
we don't at all. Like I think we made that clear, right?
yeah. So I just want to take the long view, and I want to talk about what happens when a country that has a glorious history, and is a great supporter of the arts, is a great champion of knowledge and freedom, suddenly comes under the influence and the ownership of other countries. Because I believe this is what is happening here. And it's really not, I don't want to get Democrats mad at me, because you know what? It's really not Republicans against Democrats. I myself am a libertarian, but you know what? It's not about Democrats against libertarians or Republicans against libertarians. It's really about outsiders against America, in my opinion. And a lot of people still don't know that because they're listening to the news, and the news will not tell them that, because the mainstream media are already all owned by somebody else. Okay. So I want, I've never been that interested in Korea before this year. I guess I should apologize to all my Korean friends. I did have, over the lifetime, I've had lots of friends who came from Korea, and I was good friends with them, but I never asked them about the history of their country. And I kind of, they didn't, tell me. And so I didn't know. But I now, because I'm seeing the rise of Korean drama, and I'm seeing that the only place you can see anything about freedom is on
Korean.
Korean television. which is, who would have thought? And of course, I'm talking about South Korea, not North Korea. But I want to read. Whoa, Dongmei has fallen down. Poor guy. This is Dongmei. He's a guy from Korea, but he's adopted the culture of Japan. And what's going to happen to all of us is we're going to be adopting the culture of other countries more and more. I think that we can see that with the face masks, that other cultural values are overriding our own. But I want to read you from Pearl S. Buck's novel, The Living Reed, and this is about Korea. And I believe it's set in a time just before Mr. Sunshine. Okay, it's close to it, but not quite, because the queen is still alive. In Mr. Sunshine, the queen has already been murdered. Okay, but the queen of Korea is still alive, and our hero is talking to her. You know how Pearl S. Buck's books are. It starts out with a man and his wife is having a baby, and it's all that household stuff, and then of course, we have to talk about silkworms. That's really important.
Very important.
So finally, we got through a lot of just very personal stories, and we're on page 66 of the novel. And you have to be a patient reader to get there.
Yes, we do. Like, she will go on about the sky even. She's very eloquent, though, but it's very tedious at times.
Yes, it's a very slow read. And so I apologize that I haven't gotten any further than this. But I thought this is a good way to think about what happens when a country is overrun by foreigners, but it still doesn't know it, So his father is talking to the emperor, but he was sent in to talk to the queen. All right. And so we're talking about the queen, and he says to her, "You have reason, Majesty, for your faith. Through centuries, China has avoided anything that can alienate our people. But now, when we must prevent Japan from landing soldiers on our soil, can the Empress save us when it may be she cannot even save her own people? Remember the Opium Wars, which China always lost to England, who is friendly to Japan, Majesty, and who will always take Japan's part. And remember that France has cut a huge slice from the Chinese melon and claimed it for her own, Indochina, Majesty, and China cannot prevent it or take it back again." So what's happening is, it is in the emperor's court of Korea, the queen is very pro-China. Okay. And so he was sent to talk to her. The emperor sent him to talk to his wife, to try to convince her to be a little more pro-American. Okay. But she is staunchly pro-Chinese.
That's her stance, yeah.
Yes. So now the silver shoe on the imperial right foot began to tap impatiently. "France, what is it? We have only seen French priests bearing in one hand a cross and in the other a sword. I have heard that they are wine bibbers, but they make their wine of grapes, not rice." Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. We have to talk about all the details of how we make everything.
Now I want to know more about that later, but interesting. Anyway.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because they drink rice wine. "I still regret, Majesty, that our people massacred the French Christians," Ilhan said, "and even more that in our anger we attacked the American merchant ship, the General Sherman. And the worst folly was that we killed the American crew." So you know what happens when you kill an American crew. But she has no idea.
No.
The queen waves us off with her right hand. "What right had an American merchant ship in the inner waters of the Taedong River near so great a city as Pyongyang? Are there Korean ships in the rivers of what are some of the American rivers?"
Yeah. Well, like the Mississippi River, like you could,
Exactly. But the point is, she is totally not knowledgeable in American geography.
Oh, I think you're reading the. I'm sorry.
Okay. So she's trying to put herself in the shoes of the Americans, but she can't because she can't understand the American point of view.
Yeah, she doesn't understand the American mindset, but I mean, I do understand her sentiment. But at the end of the day, she's biased herself. So
Yeah,
towards China,
we are all biased, and I think it's better to just acknowledge that right from the start.
of
And
course.
and we can talk about our own biases in a minute. But anyway, Majesty, I do not know, Ilhan replied. He doesn't know American geography either, so he couldn't answer her question. Um, you see, the queen cried in triumph, we do not so much as know the names of their rivers, much less sail our ships on foreign waters. I see no difference in these wild Western peoples. And as for the Americans, who knows what they are? A mongrel people, I'm told, made up of cast-offs, the renegades, the rebels, the younger sons, the landless, and the homeless of other Western nations, which indeed we are.
In a way, yeah, that's true.
He could wait no longer. Majesty, they are our only hope, nevertheless. America alone has no dreams of empire. Not quite true, but
Nope.
with her vast territories, it may be she has no need to dream, and so can be our friend. You hurry me, the queen complained, and I'm not to be hurried. Forgive me, Majesty, Ilhan said. And then we're going to have a description here. His eyes caught sight of her hands. Okay, I'm going to skip the description of her hands and go right into the dialogue. These Western nations, have they anywhere done justly to other peoples? Their pretense is trade and religion, but their true purpose is to annex our land. No, I will have none of these Western nations. Ilhan continued in steady patience. I will remind you, Majesty, that when the diplomatic mission from Japan returned only recently from the Western countries, they reported to their emperor that these great new Western nations would not look with favor on a military coup in Korea by General Saigo. We were saved by the Western nations, Majesty. Okay. So, at that time, when we talk about China in that novel, it's not the China that we're talking about today. It's
Definitely
not.
not.
It's a China besieged by Western nations. It's that China that Taiwan is the direct descendant of.
Yeah, because I mean, the communist revolution was a direct response to we want to expel those forces, we want to nationalize our country, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, so now I want to come back and talk about where we find the United States right now, because right now we consider ourselves to be the freest country in the world. We're supposed to be maintaining freedom for everybody else. And I've had people who watch my channel say to me, if America falls, there's no place we can go to find freedom. So, what exactly is happening now in America? How is it possible that the President of the United States can be silenced like this?
I never thought that would happen, but we know who's behind it and what's driving it to some extent.
Okay, well, tell me, who's behind it and why is it happening?
Well, I mean, I can't tell you 100%, but just my sentiment is we owe a lot of debt to China. China controls it because over the years, countries rise and fall. The British Empire rose and fell. Not every country is going to be at the helm forever, and I hate to say it. I know people don't want to acknowledge this. I think America is on a decline, and China is the one that's usurping. So we owe so much money to China. Of course, they control a lot of our commerce, and I would say our social media platforms to some extent. I mean, what is your take on it?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely the case that they own those companies through other companies.
Yes.
And, one of our mutual friends said, it doesn't really matter who owns the companies. What matters is who is the CEO, who controls the directors. And
Mm,
while that is in a way part of the problem, because if somebody can control the board of directors who is not at all an owner of the company, that means that the company has already been usurped.
yeah, basically it's a hostile takeover to some extent, and I've seen that locally where, well, on a smaller scale, there was this family theme park where it was taken over, where the one CEO ousted the other, and they wanted to have a family theme park, okay, but when the other one took it over, they started having these crazy raves and something that the original owners didn't want, so they basically had to go to court to get their company back. So I mean, that's on a smaller scale, but now how do you get your company back? You don't.
Well, it's not your company anymore. Once you
No,
go,
you don't. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. And Twitter is owned. Like, let's look. There may be shareholders, but these shareholders, when you start digging, oh, Morgan Stanley, these other companies, they have large holdings in China. So I would say the Chinese government indirectly controls our social media, and we know that.
okay, would you like to share some of your sources, Julia?
Okay, so the first ones we have in just Investopedia. So let me go to screen share. And then that one. Do you see it now, Aya?
Oh, hold on. Yes, I do see it. Hold on. Now I do.
Okay, so top 5 Twitter shareholders. Nearly 75% of all Twitter stock is owned not by individuals, but by institutional investors who buy large stakes in companies for their clients. That's a key word. The name below shuffle places on the list from time to time, but the latest figures available for mid-June 2019, the Vanguard Group, by the way, when you Google Vanguard, they have major holdings in China, in the Bank of Shanghai. So, I mean, I could go deeper and keep showing you that, but I think if you just do 2 or 3 Google searches, go, you're going to see that these companies, Vanguard Group, Morgan Stanley, now BlackRock Fund, I didn't really search them as much, but Morgan Stanley and Vanguard, major holdings in China, okay? So I don't see how that is not bluntly clear who has a major shareholder in our social media at this point. But here's another one. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in Vanguard. Can we focus on that? I think you
You want
found
to focus? Do you want to go back to Vanguard right here, or just go out of screen share? What would?
no, you had an article about the holdings of Vanguard and who
Oh
owns
yeah,
them.
I did. I'll have to go find that one. Okay, let me see. We're not. No, that's something
I'll
else.
tell you
Sorry.
why I'm interested. When I asked the question on Facebook, one of my Facebook friends said that she mentioned Vanguard, and she says she's a part owner of Vanguard, that she invests in Vanguard. Now, I don't really understand that. So I asked her if she knew where the offices of Vanguard are. Okay. So I'm interested in that question myself.
Okay, so here's something from August of this year. Yahoo Finance, Vanguard, China's fund market strategy cloud after the Asia setbacks. Their offices are now in Shanghai.
Can we share that particular article?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find where I had that one because it's back in search history. So you can keep talking while I look for it if you like. Do you want to share anything else?
No, I mean, as you talk about these sources, I might ask you more questions, but actually you're a better researcher than I am, Julia, so I'm
No,
kind of
yeah, no, I definitely. But what I gathered just from these searches last night was, oh, you look at the shareholder, you look at where are they from, like what are their major investments, and there was a shift, okay, a shift from offices being in Hong Kong to Shanghai right around the time of all the things that happened with Hong Kong basically lost their human rights. Vanguard.
Okay, I'm very interested in that, Julia.
Yes, I know. It's back and I thought I had that one up. So here we go. Here we go. I found it again, so.
Okay, good. No, I remember you sent me the link last night, so I just thought you had it handy.
Oh, no. I did have it, but it was back in the search history. I'm sorry. Okay. So
Okay.
investment firm Vanguard is leaving Hong Kong to focus on mainland China boom. Right there.
Julia, on the screen. Okay, now it's better. On the screen,
Okay.
they have it double. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. One of the world's largest asset management companies is pulling out of Hong Kong. This to go away. They're pulling out of Hong Kong and they're going into mainland China. So those businesses mostly serve institutional clients. See, we keep seeing that again, and not individual investors who are our primary. Beijing has strict control over Chinese capital markets, leaving small-time investors with few options to invest outside of property in the stock market. Even so, retail investing is blooming. There are roughly 170 million individual investors in the country, and 80% jumped from 5 years ago. Okay, what is going on? That's weird. Okay, hold on. I'm having some problems with this. Let's go out of this screen share. I don't know why it's doing that. I'm sorry. I didn't tell it to do that. But essentially, if you look at that article, it's talking about the switch from Hong Kong, where they basically had a crackdown on human rights, to focusing offices on mainland China. And why is the shift to mainland China? It's pretty simple, because that's where everything is centralized and they don't want people having a free say. I mean, just follow
Okay,
the.
so who are the majority of investors in Vanguard? Are they all people like my friend who lives in Texas, or are they mostly people in China?
Well, I would say it's a mixture, but they're taking over the Chinese market. So we could go look deeper into Vanguard and say who are the majority shareholders of Vanguard. And it says Vanguard. So we have a list of companies. It's showing top 10 American owners of Vanguard, but we also see who is like who owns Vanguard. There's an Investopedia article about it.
Okay.
I can share that.
Okay. You see, my intellectual friends, I guess I don't count as an intellectual person, but my intellectual friends are all investing in the stock market and they think they actually know about business because they do this. And so there's something about these leftists that they've always liked the stock market. And they've always felt that the stock market does serve them. And in reality, I don't think they're against corporations. They're
not.
Many of them either work for corporations or work in academic institutions that are financed through government and donations from large institutions.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're really part of the establishment. And they feel comfortable with the idea that these large institutions can manipulate what goes on in the world, including the outcome of the US election.
Well, to some extent, that's so here's something talking about Vanguard and China's. The fund seeks to provide investment results. They are not being straight up honest about like China's majority ownership. But as I search, I keep seeing they keep talking about Shanghai. They keep talking about focusing investment in mainland China. So it's not giving me a percentage in any of these articles that are coming up. I just keep seeing again and again that they're shifting their focus to mainland China into these investments. So why is that? I think you just have to ask yourself why. It's pretty obvious.
Well, yeah, no, the thing that once you do business in China, you know that the economy is not free in China. I'm not going to say the economy is really free in the United States either right now.
No,
But,
it's not.
but we know that in China, they don't mince words about it. They don't even have to pretend that the government doesn't control the economy. And so if you're going to do business in China, you and your company do not have free speech. And not only do they not have free speech in China, but they really don't have free speech anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter where you go, because if most of your assets are in China, you have to do as China says, even when you're not in China.
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, and even look at our own national debt. A large amount of it is controlled by China. And there's just basic articles when you're doing searches talking about how China owns the majority of our economy. China has come in and bought many of our major companies. Like look at Hummer, like when they were about to go belly up, a Chinese company bought out Hummers and they said, now you got to keep your jobs. The way that they approached the employees, they said, you're lucky because you can keep your jobs. So, but what does that mean? What does that entail?
Right. Okay, so that's something that we have to keep in mind when we're talking about what options any of us have to get out from under any of the major social media companies. And I think one of the ways that we can stop blaming Democrats or whoever we don't like in the, I tend to blame liberals or academicians or any of those people. None of these people are really the problem. And if we continue to blame each other for what's going on, that's exactly what the enemy wants. That's not help us.
Good old divide and conquer politics. It's been around since the beginning of time. Like you divide the people, they don't notice what you're doing at the top. It's
right. So without saying anything about Trump being some sort of a saint or a martyr, I certainly don't want to see him as a martyr. I'm concerned for him because I'm afraid that the moment he's no longer president, something might happen to him. And if we're not in touch with him on Twitter, we won't know what happened. He'll just disappear like Jack Ma in China, who had a large business. And then one day he got in trouble for saying something, when obviously he was trying to be mild about it.
He was very mild. Yeah, but he just, any critique, that's how the Chinese government works. Oh, you say something that we don't like, we're going to silence you. I mean, we used to condemn those tactics, but not anymore.
Right. So, and I'm sure our viewers can look up Jack Ma and find out what happened to him. We don't have to share every single article on screen, but the reason I started thinking about this is one of my libertarian friends said, listen, if you don't like what's going on with Twitter, why don't you do a hostile takeover of Twitter?
Well, the Chinese government already did, by the way, how China built its Twitter propaganda machine. There's an article about it. I know we're not going to share everything, but there's still accounts up on Twitter that are basically like fake accounts where people are pretending to be Americans and others in the West propagating Chinese communist lines. So
yeah, and which is fine. I think that's part of the price of freedom is that you allow your enemies to talk as much as they want to.
They can say whatever they want.
I
issue when we start taking away other people's accounts, like certain people's accounts, but then these people over here that might have done something really atrocious, they can keep their account. That's okay.
Right, exactly. So, I would be perfectly happy for the chairman of the Communist Party in every country to have a Twitter account and say whatever he wants to on Twitter, as long as everybody else, including you and me and Mr. Trump, can also do the same thing.
Do you remember? Well, it's almost been about a year when they had the Chinese parade celebrating the 70th anniversary of the takeover of the Communist Party. It was pretty phenomenal. Just they wanted to show the world how powerful they were. It was so. Did you watch any of that?
Was that when Trump went to visit them? I don't remember.
It was a little bit before that, I believe. It was maybe around January of last year, but it was phenomenal, like the amount of money and time. But basically, what they wanted to show us was we are a superpower to be reckoned with. Look at
Oh,
us. Look how, yeah,
yeah.
they wanted us to know. Like it was
Look,
quite a,
communist countries are good at parades and things of that sort. I mean, even North Korea has some pretty phenomenal parades.
but here's the difference: is it was being streamed on YouTube this time, live streamed to the West. It's just a different world because it used to be, oh, we would kind of criticize the shortcomings of communist countries, but now I'm not saying they were glorifying it.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's good that we have an eye onto the rest of the world.
Yeah,
And I'm not worried about propaganda, as
yeah, for
long.
sure. Let them have it.
Right, exactly. The problem is when you and I can't speak, when Mr. Trump can't speak, when all sorts of other people in the United States are not allowed to speak, and China can say whatever it wants, that's a problem.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I do think back to the beginning of the pandemic. All I did was I made a video where I said I had a leak in my kitchen, okay? And I had to go outside because they were telling people that they couldn't go outside, and they took that video down.
Yeah, we've all experienced
Yeah,
very, very bizarre little things,
but
little.
that wasn't even a political video. I was just talking about like a home repair issue.
Right. Yeah, I understand. We've all had weird things. I had a video about pears on my pear tree, and that got taken down because it was too sexual. But that's neither here nor there.
No, yeah, I'm not trying to go off topic, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, no. The topic being that we can't do a hostile takeover of Twitter. It's not possible for you or me, obviously, because we're not wealthy. But even wealthy people, Donald Trump is a fairly wealthy man, and he knows a lot of other wealthy men as well. And you would think that they could all get together and take over Twitter. I wouldn't put it past him to want to do that. I don't think he can.
No, he can't. In fact, they wanted to silence him, and I didn't know there was such a big push for it. Okay, what I didn't get was I never liked Donald Trump. I didn't care about his Twitter account. But what always kind of surprised me is I guess we should say liberal more than Democrat, but liberal people seem to know more about his Twitter account, and they seem to obsess about everything he was saying, whereas I was just living my life focusing on other issues, and I wasn't obsessed with him every day, but they seem to really know a lot about it, and their main goal was to get it deleted and removed from the internet. So, but they did the same thing to Louis Farrakhan, and I'm not a fan of Louis Farrakhan either. But why does Louis Farrakhan, Donald Trump, all these characters, why do they need to lose their page and their account?
I don't know, but let me ask you this, Julia. Do you have an iPhone?
I used to, but I got rid of the iPhone just because it was having a lot of issues.
Okay.
I have
Well,
an Android though, and they took it off. I know what we're talking about. That app is no longer there on Android either. So Google Play also took it away.
okay, we're talking about the Parlor app.
Yes, like I could look right now, like just to see, like if I go
Okay.
into. I mean, what were you gonna say though about that?
Well, when I got up this morning, my iPhone told me there was an update, and if I wanted to, I could, update my phone, and I haven't done it because I was told that I Apple was planning to disable the emergency system.
Parlor's no longer available, but they give you these other options.
I see. I see. Yeah. Yeah. So, and there's a very nice video of Amy Peacock talking to Tucker Carlson.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea that Amy Peacock was part of Parlor.
I didn't even know that. Yeah.
Yeah, and she has an association with the Ayn Rand Institute.
Mm-hmm. I didn't see anything that people like. Look, I only looked at Parlor briefly because I thought, oh, it might be an interesting alternative to Twitter. And what I liked about Parlor was I wasn't posting anything political at all. I have a hair channel. It's kind of a silly channel. I mean, I talk about some serious things, but mostly it's just about, lifestyle things. And I got a little bit more traffic on there. And when I went on there, I don't know, personally, I wasn't finding all these unsavory like posts that people kept talking about. I didn't see what they were talking about because I think Parler removed the content that violated their TOS. I don't think Amy lied about that in her interview. She said that they were removing that content. But what about this? Twitter and Facebook had that same sort of content. So any of those people that gathered and went to do things like, I don't know, whatever it was that they did, they also used the other platforms. Why did they have to single out Parler?
Look, I mean, I actually believe, and this is my firm belief, that under the Constitution of the United States, anybody who says, I want to overthrow the government has the right to say that. Okay. Um, and then other people have the right to ignore that person. And throughout history, that's exactly what people did. There were always some people who wanted to overthrow the government, and there was always most people didn't want to. So nothing got done, you know?
Yeah. I personally don't agree with those people. I don't like those people who did that. I mean, this is going to be straight up. I really hate what they did,
Oh,
but
I'm not sure that those people were actually genuine. I'm not sure
yeah.
that they weren't ushered into the Capitol by the police on one hand and then shot at from the other
Yeah,
side.
I mean, it is questionable, like how they came in. I did see some video where there were police officials letting some of them in, and they were taking selfies with them. So it's a little bit confusing that we see that, but then on the other end, they're saying it was worse than what we.
Yeah, but I don't even want to talk about that incident.
Yeah.
That's not my point here.
Hmm.
My point here is that you know, under free speech, you're allowed to say that. And most of the time, nothing happens. Um, you're also allowed to publish false information about medical matters, and it's protected by free speech. But right now, if you say anything that goes contrary to the CDC about a certain disease, whether you're right or wrong, that's not even my issue. Um, they're going to take you down.
Yeah.
So we're in a situation where if the power is all consolidated into the hands of one party, um, and the power of the social media also is consolidated, and they all act as one. You know, whoever thought that in the free market all the companies would act the same?
I didn't
Wouldn't you?
think that would happen. And also, we used to have antitrust suits against companies who want to break them up. But apparently, we're not going to break up Google, who owns Twitter now. So, and indirectly, Amazon and Twitter and Google, like, they're all acting in their same interests.
Right. And the thing is, our intellectual class, and we do have an intellectual class, is all employed by those people.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. To be honest with you, I always love learning and academia, but when I went to university, I guess things that turned me off were I love like classical, well-researched text on history, and I was really turned off, as were a lot of people that were from other countries that lived the history of, like, let's say, people from Mexico. I took a Mexican history course, and a lot of people were criticizing this course because this person wrote like gibberish about the history of Mexico, and they were just saying all these different things, and they said it sounded like it was very just communist slant, and this wasn't really the history of Mexico. And they were like, why are we reading this? It's gibberish. And I was sitting there too. I'm like, what are we reading? It really was confusing. It didn't even seem like decipherable. So the professor was like, yeah, well, people just like to make a point, but they don't want to get criticized for it. So we're like, can we read a real history text? So then we read something from like written back in 1920 about, different leaders, and that was more comprehensible. I hate that. Like, but that's how history texts are today. Like the more current ones are a lot of political theory, and I don't really like political theory. It tends to be very left leaning, gibberish in my opinion, but people can take me down for saying that. But that's part of why I didn't want to be part of academia in the history sense. You had to have a very liberal slanted view. If you didn't say the right things, people like another student could criticize you in class, and then the professor might not like you for a while until you proved yourself again that, oh, you could look at different points of view that other students didn't see. But that happened to me once just because I said something about, okay, in Brazil there was a rebellion of some Muslims in the tropics. And I just said, well, historically in Islam, there have been militancy. And I talked about the history of that. And this one boy that was Muslim said, I object to that. So it seemed like the professor didn't like me anymore just because I pointed out, I have nothing against Muslims. I pointed out a historical fact, and he seemed to be against everything I said after that for months.
Yeah. And right now, you're actually the one who's pointing out that the Uyghur population.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything against Muslims. I feel bad for the Uyghurs. That's the thing. Like, I don't like to see them persecuted. I look at things in a balanced way. I'm just saying I look at history for the facts, not for a political agenda. I mean, I have my own biases, but
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, the takeaway that I would hope that anybody who watches this takes away is not that we should be either pro-Trump or against Trump, or that we should be pro-big business or against big business, or pro-academicians or against academicians. But it's absolutely impossible right now for anyone to attempt a hostile takeover of Twitter or Google or any of those. And it's not because, you and I are not rich enough. If we took all the citizens of the entire United States and we wanted to do that, we still couldn't. I don't think we have enough money.
No, we don't. And also it's interest time. I think people just don't care about anything beyond their own interests in a way. Like, people just want to care about their own social lives, their own family lives. They're not really concerned about American Constitution and core values. I don't think they care, do they?
I think a lot of people do care. If you look at the red states, for instance, I think there are a lot of people in the red states who really genuinely care. They just don't know what to do.
Yeah, that may be true. I mean, I don't want to criticize anybody, but just what I see more out in the West, I guess. It just seems like people are more concerned about in day-to-day life, like, and it is important to have a livelihood and to pay your bills, but it's almost as if people just don't care about our Constitution anymore, or freedom of speech, things that are supposed to be enshrined in our country's legacy. They don't care. Because if somebody might be a veiled threat, like, I guess this particular person's a threat, they need to be done away with completely. I don't know. I don't have the answers, Aya. I really don't. I just think it's.
Well, today I felt as if I did have an answer, and it wasn't to put down the American people. My point is not to say the American people don't care about the Constitution. I would like to think that the American people still do care, the majority of them.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think that there's nothing we can do because your neighbor is not the problem. My neighbor is not the problem. And the problem is not even the people in the Capitol. I mean, yes, there are a lot of people who are selling America out, but you have to ask yourself, if they're selling America out, who are they selling it to?
No, to China, essentially. I mean,
Right. So I think what we need is we need to unify. We need to get ourselves a righteous army of people who know what they're fighting for. In the Korean series that I'm doing all of these paintings for, and this is the last of them so far, Mr. Sunshine, at least the Koreans knew that they were under attack.
mhm.
They knew that their country was not free.
They were
They,
aware of that. Yeah.
yes, they knew that their emperor was in trouble. Now, some of them didn't like the emperor, but they were still fighting for the same Korea.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. They cared about the country.
Right. And I think that there are a lot of very good people in the United States who still care about the core values of the Constitution.
Mhm. That's a good point.
But they can't do anything because they don't realize that we don't really have free enterprise anymore in the first place, and that we don't really own our companies, and that it's really not our local representatives who are making the decisions that we don't like.
Yeah, it's going to be higher up. Well, here's another question. I always think about it this way. I guess the more advanced the culture becomes, the less of a frontier you have, the more consolidated where corporations can take over and we have corporate capitalism. Is it impossible to have free enterprise in a technologically driven world?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question, Julie. I think I'm asking myself that. Lots of people are asking themselves that. Um, that's why when barrister Amanda Jones, kept talking about how much better off we were than in earlier times because of the medical advances, I was kind of pushing back, and I said, you know what, 1812 doesn't look that bad to me. Um, and the reason is I I'm sure there are a lot of people who died of childhood diseases, and there were a lot of things we didn't have. We certainly didn't have television or the internet or this or that or our own personal car. But I don't really think that those are the things that matter.
It's
I
true.
think,
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
so I
Sorry.
was going to say, well, look at modern life. You may have a longer life expectancy. You're less likely to die of an infectious disease up until 2020. However, depression, it's skyrocketing. All sorts of mental health issues are going up. And those were not really things that people dealt with back in 1812, where you had a cause, you had something to believe in. That's what I truly believe. When you have something to believe in, to work towards, I feel like your mind is set to something more ideal. I feel like having more idle time is what promotes a lot of these mental health issues, really.
Yeah, it's the fact that we don't control our own destinies, that we don't make our own food, we don't actually do as much work by hand, um,
Hmm.
and we also just I don't think we have as much privacy as we used to have, at least in America, because neighbors used to be very far away from each other.
Yeah, they did. But now it's like everybody knows what everybody else is doing. And well, I've kind of encountered that too, where just somebody told me recently, I want to think this person isn't a stalker, but they told me a lot of things about things that I did over the years, which I thought was weird because I never really had any interactions with this person, but they seem to know a lot about me. So I don't know. They were just a nosy neighborhood person, I guess.
Well, I mean, it's getting to the point where through satellites, they can see what's going on in our homes.
Yeah.
So uh, it might get to the point where they say, well, we need to know what's going on in every home because how do we know that people are not radicalized? Did you hear that word, radicalized?
Yeah, I mean that kind of does make me pause for a minute. Why are we looking to see if somebody is radicalized? Like innocent until proven guilty? does that mean anything anymore?
And besides which, the whole concept of being radicalized is confusing to me. I mean, the idea that somebody else takes a person and turns that person into radical. Well, who do you think radicalized George Washington, you know, and made him a rebel?
Well, and that's another thing you have to think about too. Like if you look at it from the 1776 perspective, yes, they were radicals. They were overthrowing the British government. Like, but I guess it just depends on your viewpoint on these things, right?
Well, about everything. And you know what? I understand that every person has a different perspective. No two people have the exact same thoughts on anything.
No, definitely not.
And that's okay. That's the beauty of life. And we should protect that.
And I don't want to silence somebody because they say ridiculous things. I know I keep going back to that, but there's a lot of art. If we're looking at this from an art perspective that I don't agree with, that I think is gibberish, but it's in art galleries. And do we say, oh, I don't think that should be there because I don't agree with that message today? You know?
Well, in art galleries, there's a lot of art that is such gibberish. There is no message to it. Art, I believe that art, real art does have a message. In fact,
Yes.
I'm going to do sort of a linguistic, etymological review of what painting and poem mean. And I'm going to do that on the Inverted A Press site sometime this month.
Mm-hmm.
So, from the English perspective, a painting is just something you smear paint on. So it could be that you smear paint on and it looks like a person or a plant or a thing, but you could smear paint and it could just look like a pattern, like the
Like,
pattern on my sweater here.
yeah.
And so people say, well, that's also a painting. But in Hebrew, we call it siul. We don't call it something that got smeared paint on it. We call it something that represents in 2 dimensions, something in 3 dimensions. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah. So there's a lot of stuff in art galleries right now that, is making a lot of money and is not saying anything. It doesn't have any perspective. It's just maybe pretty. Maybe the colors are pretty. Maybe there are stripes. Maybe
Some of
there are.
it's not even pretty. Like honestly, like my viewpoint, I had one TA who actually had the audacity to say that not everything you see in an art gallery is art. Like she was actually independent thinking. She goes, I know the professor might say that this is all art, but she goes, it's okay. She goes, she worked at a big art museum and she's like, there were things she saw. She goes, I don't think that's art. I don't think that has a message. And and she goes, the thoughts I had at the very beginning of studying art history didn't change or evolve as I was working on my master's. But most of the professors wouldn't say that. They would be like, oh, that is so artistic and it's so deep and it might just be like a whole bunch of smears or it might just be like a map. Like literally this lady drew a map, like she replicated a map and it was very artistic and it just things that didn't really have a deep message to them, which I guess have, aesthetic merit to some
Yeah,
people.
well, I mean, even if you look at this painting, well, there's this robe that the samurai is wearing, and the robe has some kind of pattern on it.
Yes.
Okay. And I didn't really do a very good job of replicating that pattern, but I'm trying, it's, you get the idea there's a pattern there. So
Mm-hmm.
somebody could say, well, my whole painting is just that pattern. That's what it is. And it's okay. That's fine. Everybody's got their own values, everybody's got what they like. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, if people are buying art in order to decorate their home, they care more about, the color scheme than they do of what is represented in the painting. And that's fine too, you know.
I kind of have a little bit of my own art story. I took art in high school and I had a really great art teacher. She actually had a master's degree in art. She said she thought about doing a PhD, but I guess time had stopped her. But she actually entered her art in art shows. She was very well versed on the history of art. She encouraged me actually. She thought I should like do a double major in art because she said I had some talent. But when I started taking art classes in college, I was very discouraged because right away I guess I'm just not a good art student because they were like they want you to draw something really quick, and I get it. Like that's part of art classes. They want you to do a lot of quick drawings, and that's fine. That's not how I operated, but I felt like right away judged because if you don't conform to certain standards, like they're like, well, you're not a real art student, or even if you did draw a very nice drawing, they're like, well, like we want you to draw this. Like they basically just wanted you to either copy something or it had to look a certain way, and I felt like very stifled in the art classes, so I stopped taking them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I never tried to take art in college. I did take art, when I was a young teenager. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I just got the impression that I wasn't considered one of the better students. That's all. It's not that they said you can't do this, but they said you need to master landscapes before you can do portraits. Well, I'm never going to do landscapes. I'm just not that good at it. And I'm not that interested.
I always like to me, like I like to draw and I like to paint, but I just did it more for fun and out of my own interest. I don't want to conform to some standard, I suppose. So I don't claim to be the best artist when I draw. I just draw things because I enjoy it, but it probably doesn't have a deep message either, to be honest with you. Like
Well,
honestly, it's for fun for me, but that's different.
no, it's okay. I'm not saying my art has a deep message. For heaven's sake, I didn't say that at all.
No, but I do like that you have a message to your paintings. I do feel like there's some messages there that people can get. I think that's pretty cool.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be really honest. I am taking this up in my old age after having written all the novels that I plan to write.
Hmm.
So when I was a young girl, and I had a list of things I wanted to do, which included bringing up a child, and included doing something with the law, which I did practice
You
law.
did do that, yes.
Yes, and teaching a chimpanzee how to read and write, and I did do that too. Um, so, you know, art was way, way down there on my list. In fact, it didn't make it to the list, but it doesn't mean that I don't like art. I
Mhm.
always liked it. I always liked to draw and scribble. And, in the margins of my notebooks, there were always drawings. I just didn't think they were important. At the
Mhm.
time, I was just, I said, well, I can't be doing everything. So this is the thing that I won't do because I know other people do it so much better than me. Um, but now I have the time and the desire to apply myself more to it. I realize that I'm just learning. I'm not going to say that my art is super deep or anything like that. But it, I I like to represent characters. I like to
Mhm.
try to not just draw the outside of a person, but maybe to sort of indicate something about them on the inside, on the outside in a painting, which is kind of a weird way of putting it.
But I get what you're saying. Is you do capture the essence of many characters in your paintings. It's pretty cool. Like Mr. Sunshine, I kind of can see his. It seems like
Yeah.
you get an idea of who he is.
Yes. I mean, in fact, I don't think I got his face right, but it is a sort of an atmospheric piece. So I keep trying to improve, but then I get very disappointed with myself because you know how when you think you have a breakthrough, you think, oh, now everything will be all better, but it isn't necessarily all
Yeah,
better. Um, so at one point, I had that breakthrough with the gloss medium.
that was pretty cool. Yeah,
Yeah, and I did a painting of you when you were a child, and I
I
used
love that. Yeah.
yeah, and I used a lot of gloss medium for it. But you know what? I've run out of gloss medium, so I can't do that anymore.
Aw.
And it's not for sale in the store.
That's
Uh,
too bad. Yeah, we are running out of short supply. I've noticed ever since the beginning of the pandemic. They finally are getting some of the canvases and paints back, but then 2 days later, because I'm weird. I like to go look at the art supply section, even though I have art supplies, and I always notice, oh, in a few days it's all gone, but they don't have everything they once carried. And I guess they don't deliver certain art supplies to certain parts of the country right now. Like it's hard to get certain things, right?
yes. So after I finish a painting, I like to varnish it, and I did varnish this one, and I did varnish that one, but I've run out of varnish. And I wanted to order it from Amazon. They said they couldn't ship it to my P.O. box because it's such a combustible substance. So I changed it and I said, okay, here's my street address. Can you deliver it here? They said, no, it's still too combustible to deliver it anywhere.
Huh.
So then you found for me that it was
Yeah,
available.
Walmart. Yeah, I
Oh,
saw on the Walmart that they charge a lot more, I guess, for
yeah,
delivery.
no, they charged me twice as much. I mean, they said if you go into the store and it happens to be in the store, it costs this much. But if you want it delivered to your house, it will cost twice as much. I guess because it's such a combustible.
Item commodity. The only other thing I could think of too is Lowe's or like other hardware. If you have like a hardware store in your area, they usually have something that's similar and they might carry it. That's another thought.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what I did for this. Can you see a kind of shiny gloss to it?
Oh yeah, I like it. What did you do?
Olive oil.
Oh, that's smart. We have olive oil right now.
Yeah, so it's not like I didn't smear olive oil after I finished. What I did was I used olive oil as a medium, and uh, I dipped my brushes in olive oil, and then I dipped them in the paint.
I've done that before actually with oil. It's a good
Yeah,
point. Yeah. I
so
did
that's
it with
how I got it.
baby oil too. And
Oh,
which is kind of weird. I just happen to have some. Olive oil is probably better, but I did it with baby oil, and that also worked pretty good and did provide a glossy result.
right. So I am experimenting with different ways to get what I want, but I also have canvases painted by real artists, professional artists. And what I
Mhm.
know is you can get really close to their canvas and you don't see the brush strokes.
Hmm.
And everything is evenly distributed. But if you look at mine, they still look messy, so messy. So I don't know if I'll ever get better.
There's a lot of professional artists where you can still see brush strokes. I mean, the Impressionists, that's the whole idea was that it was an impression, and people love Impressionist art. So I don't know. It depends on like I think you are getting better. I think it's just what is your expectation. I think you're improving all the time. Like this painting right here, I would say is a year of improvement over things you were painting last year. And you can see it in their in lady, what's her name? Goshen's face. Am I saying her name?
Lady Asian.
Asian. See, I haven't watched it. I'm sorry. Her face, it's an improvement over what you were painting last year. So I do see improvements. I think it's just what is your expectation? Maybe you're just setting the expectation too high. And I think you have improved. You just have to step back and kind of look at it.
Yeah, I appreciate your saying that, and maybe you're right. I would like to think that that is the case, but yeah. So this is still my art channel, um, and you will see art and how I paint some things. I have asked a singer from down under to sing one of my songs uh, about this fellow
Mm-hmm.
and how he loves Lady Asian. So maybe uh, you'll get to hear some real professional singing because it's really hard to use out of copyright uh, musical scores and things because all sorts of idiots are claiming that it belongs to them when it doesn't. So,
Yeah, I always wonder like how that's happening. There was one other one too that is definitely a public domain song, and some group claimed it just because they published a CD with it. But
right. So um, if you watch how I painted this one, I was trying to use the yellow rose of Texas, and there was
mhm.
a Coast Guard recording of the band playing that, and there are variations in it. It's not just that, but um, so I used that recording, and then YouTube told me that the first 1 minute and 9 seconds of that recording belonged to somebody else, um, and and I
Okay.
I don't understand how somebody happens to own just 1 minute and 9 seconds of it. But according to the archive where I got that recording, since it's the Coast Guard or any of the armed forces, they're not allowed to claim copyright to their playing, to their performances. Therefore, it is in the public domain. Obviously, that song is so old, it's also in the public domain. And so it should, all of it, not just, the next 6 minutes, but the whole thing should be in the public domain.
Yeah, that's common sense, but apparently YouTube doesn't understand what public domain is precisely. I don't know.
Yeah, so they gave me the option to accept this or to reject it and claim that it belongs to me. Well, it doesn't belong to me. I never would say that. So they're not giving me the option to say, hey, it doesn't belong to them or me or anybody.
That's absurd.
Yeah. So this is the kind of thing that happens when you have these public companies and they're the only game in town, and there's no way to overthrow them.
You can't, and that's another reason I'm always hesitant to use music. I've started using it more on videos, but this is my fear about that. I'm just afraid in a few years, what if they say, oh, all these free use songs on YouTube are really owned by us, or they change it and then you lose your monetization. That's been one of my fears. Like, I know that songs on edited videos do really well, but that's why I'm afraid to use music a lot of the time. And I only use it to cover up background noise because I have fears about what are they going to come back and say later.
Well, Julie, if we talk about our fears, my fear is that one day I will be locked out of all of my social media the way the president has been.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do you?
I would hope not, because like you don't say anything everything you say is innocuous. What you share your views. I mean,
That's not a compliment, Julia.
well, I'm not saying it as a criticism.
I know, but to say everything I say is innocuous. Look, here's the truth. I say a lot of inflammatory things, but I have no power. The reason I haven't been shut down is not because everything I say is innocuous. What we were talking about today is not innocuous at all.
No, it's not. I know it's inflammatory to some people, and some people would take big judgment, but we're not big YouTubers like with a
Right.
$800,000 following, so they don't care.
The reason we are not being shut down is that nobody is listening to us, so it doesn't matter, so we don't threaten anyone.
Yeah, that's probably about right.
Yeah, that's what's going on. So really, this particular broadcast was intended primarily for my friends who actually paid attention to the status that I put up about what my suspicions were. And I hope they at least will listen to our conversation and see the information that you provided, because you dug up some good things.
Yeah, I dug up that follow my suspicions. Like, it's right there, we can see it, but they don't want us to see it. At the end of the day, I guess I'm not as passionate about speaking out against it either. Like, I see it, I'm concerned, but at the end of the day, my fears are I don't want to be too outspoken about it because I am afraid that they could shut us out, and I'm afraid to say something that might cross the line. I don't know. That's my fear. That's probably why I temper myself a lot, because I'm like, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but am I supposed to feel that way in America? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, I always try to avoid insulting people. I don't want to fight with anybody. I don't want to have a personal vendetta with any person. But I will speak truth, and I will speak it to power if power will even listen,
I guess since they're not really listening to us, we're not a threat. But let's say a larger YouTube account said similar things, yes, it would be a problem.
Right, exactly. So what we really need to do is make sure that all the little people just like us, are saying the same, are aware of this and are willing to say it. Because the thing of the matter is, if we all rebel at the same time, we can win. But if each of us rebels separately, we can't win.
No, we can't. I mean, I would like to see a world where free enterprise can win, can thrive. My concern is in a technology driven world, I believe that corporate capitalism is becoming the new norm. I'm not saying I like that. That just seems to be the trend.
Well, you know, before the War of 1812, corporations were not widespread.
Hmm.
I mean, there was business.
But
There was
not like now. Yeah, there weren't as many corporations for sure.
no, there were businesses, but the businesses were owned by people who were responsible for what the businesses did.
Hmm. But now
And
you can do anything with your business, go belly up and be bailed out by the government. So,
well, not everyone can. See
well, not
that,
everybody, but some
yeah,
certain ones can.
yeah. We're going to have a live stream on my main channel on the 15th of January, which is not very far away. It's
Hmm.
this Friday, and our guest is going to be Karen Ann Harlows, and we're going to talk about corporations and whether they are people and whether they should have the same rights as individuals.
Hmm. Good. That should be a good talk.
Yeah. So, is there anything else do you think that we should cover today?
No, I feel like we did cover the issue quite fairly and honestly, and I'm glad that you shared a lot of your insights on this topic, things that I think other people don't look into. And I always enjoy reading your statuses because of that.
Well, Julia, I appreciated everything that you contributed to the live stream, including your very excellent research into the ownership of all of those conglomerates.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. I think we just have to dig a little bit deeper. It's there, but they can kind of shuffle it around so then we don't see it and people aren't going to make the connection.
I think they're hiding it in plain sight. Anybody who wants to know can know.
Yeah, it is in plain sight. People don't always want to see what's in plain sight too. But I think the cursory person's not going to be like, oh, like Twitter. They're just okay. A lot of people just listen to what's on the mainstream news and they tell them that Donald Trump's account is dangerous and it needs to be shut down. So they're going to be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then they're just all going to go post the same thing on social media. So I feel like a lot of people maybe put too much trust just in a mainstream news broadcast and they're not reading and researching to look. And this is not even saying that I don't go look at these crazy QAnon sites. Honestly, you know what's funny is that liberals who were watching MSNBC, they seem to know more about that than I did,
Well,
which
I
is
don't know anything about that, but I think if the events of the past few days have proven anything, it's that Donald Trump never had any power in the first place.
no, he didn't. And they even said that with Obama too, because I guess Obama during the end of his presidency, he was becoming frustrated because he started to begin to realize he didn't really have power. The presidency is a figurehead to a great extent, and people maybe now are beginning to realize that.
Well, yeah, but I think Congress is also a figurehead. I
Well,
just think,
yeah, now at this point, we know like who owns most of the national debt and who owns most of the economy, the world economy, and that is China. And that look, I love Chinese culture and history. I'm not criticizing
too.
China.
I have it too.
Oh, I love China. Like a lot of stories that I think are so interesting are based in Chinese history and culture. What I kind of take issue with is just this whole communist corporate world where they want to micromanage what everybody says. I think that's sad because a lot of beautiful culture was lost with that movement.
Yes.
Or should
I,
they try to suppress it anyway? You know.
and I know a lot of Chinese people, very good people,
Yeah.
who also would like all of that to go away.
And you're a very big supporter of China more than most people. You know a lot about China. You've written about it in your books. Like, I think it's really interesting to hear the things you know about from living in Taiwan. So I
Yeah.
just want to preface that at the end. I don't want anybody to think, oh, we're being anti-China because we're not. We're talking about the government, and we have an issue with the way that they want to control the world economy.
Right. And our minds,
Yes,
especially minds.
our minds. And
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it is. But I'll tell you what, thanks to you and what you dug up and our conversation today, I have a little bit more hope. And I think maybe other people will find hope in knowledge.
I think so too. And I think we just have to keep sharing our thoughts as long as we can. And maybe it's a good thing that they don't really care about smaller channels being, more outspoken about these things. It might not be so bad. You can still get a few people here and there. And if more people do it, you never know what could happen.
Exactly. So, with that thought, I'm going to wish you a wonderful rest of the day.
Have a nice day, Aya.
You too, Julia.